Don't you love the nest?
Ooh, it's so nice.
Isn't it nice to be reborn again?
Oh, yes, it is.
So what do you think of JCB 69?
Well, I think it's sensual, it's flamboyant, and it's quite vibrant.
Woo! Well, I believe, Ashley, we should maybe try it right now. What do you think?
Yes.
Let's go, baby! Woo! Dear friends, I'm pleased to introduce you to the fabulous, irresistible Ashley Sherwani. So we will be talking transformation, evolution of life, and fashion, and how from wine world you have similarities to fashion and how you move from wine to fashion. Isn't it a cool topic today?
Yes, I'm very excited.
So Ashley is as well a fantastic collector of the JCB wines. So we've been friends for many years, and typically we meet up by pure accident in some great fashion designers in various parts of the world. So today in Yountville.
Yes, cheers.
Cheers. So, did you mean every word of it about JCB 69?
Oh, yes, I did. 100%.
So, you now are into the world of haute couture and fashion.
Yes.
Before we dive into the world of fashion, how did you migrate from wine, as she was a very successful lady in the wine world, to go into fashion? How do we do this?
Yeah, so I guess I'll give a little bit more of a background. I got experience sewing when I was in high school, and it was one of the very first things I did that was kind of in this big creative sense, you know, like letting myself go. And so I actually made my formal gown, and I was just so excited to create something. But, you know, in the back of my head, everything kept telling me, gotta get that bachelor's degree, and then maybe some point.
Parents were conservative on your shoulders, saying, "Be serious."
Yeah, so I was not as confident like diving into the art world. It is really big undertaking, especially fresh out of high school. So I went to Sonoma State and I got my bachelor's in wine business and marketing.
Congratulations.
Yes, thanks.
Which, when you did it, was really the beginning of an era of a great school. Teaching everything about wine. So I want to make a toast to that because you showed the way now to many great students, and our friends, Sonoma State, are the best. So.
Yeah. So after Sonoma, I did work for a very small startup right out of college. And then after that, I did some networking, and I ended up meeting people at this really big wine company. And I kind of dove in as just a marketing coordinator, doing the tasks around the office. Mm-hmm. And eventually, everyone is kind of like, what's going to happen with social media? And I'm like, well, this is what's going to happen. This is what all the big guys are doing, and we got to jump on this. So they're like, all right, you're going to do all of the social media. And so when I started, I think they had about 8 brands. So it was still like kind of a big portfolio. And over time, easily doubled. By the time I left, they had doubled. And it was just a really fast-paced environment. But at that time, I had learned how to film and edit and create videos. And so I kind of always held that little skill in the back of my little bucket of skills. And so after that, after some years, I decided that I wanted to work in tech. It's kind of like the or not the Wild West, but the gold rush.
Yeah,
everyone was going to San Francisco to go work in tech startups. And I was one of those people. So I decided to, jump ship and go into tech. It took a long time, but I eventually did it, and I worked for one very well-known startup, but one other smaller startup. And I was in charge of running, global communities,
Wow.
Hundreds of thousands of people, users that were using these apps. And throughout that time, I still retained a lot of creative expression by content creation and trying to engage the community. But over time, I kind of got a little burnt out. When you're trying to run 100 miles an hour, sometimes you need a break. So
And you had in the back of your mind sewing, fashion,
Yes,
and
always.
always that creative spirits of
Yes.
beautiful fabrics.
Yes, I love clothes. I think there's a lot of people out there who appreciate nice clothes. And I just loved dressing myself.
Yeah.
And so it was always in the back of my mind, but I never really pursued it because I was just so busy in other aspects of my life. And after leaving, I did start a startup with my husband, and our whole idea was we're gonna help make friendships better.
Yeah.
It didn't go very far. It's a very challenging problem to solve. So at that point, we decided, okay, let's go chase our own individual passions. We have the time and we have the resources to do it. Why don't we do it? So he started his company, and then I decided to go back into sewing. Oh, but I do have to give him a lot of credit for kind of encouraging me to do it.
For sure.
I think, with clothing, I always struggled with how things fit and how they accentuated my body. And I became growing more increasingly frustrated over time because I could start to nitpick how things fit. And so it was such a kind of this big open experience to be able to create things that would fit me perfectly. But it was a huge learning, a big hill to climb to learn how to actually create my own clothing. So I started off with patterns, became frustrated by patterns, then learned pattern making.
Yes.
And pattern making is very challenging. You can do the very traditional draping method where you lay cloth on top of a mannequin and form a pattern that way. You can do flat pattern making, which is kind of you have a structure of how the pattern looks, and then they call it a slash and spread, where you cut the pattern and you move it around and you shift it.
I've seen that.
And it forms new shapes. So started to get into pattern making and then realized that I was spending, a good month just trying to get a pattern correct. So I kind of took a step back and I said, you know what I'm going to do? I already know how to make patterns fairly well. Mm-hmm. I just need to find a good foundation and then modify those patterns. And so eventually...
So how do you find a good foundation?
That's the hard part. You have to know your clothes. So if you know kind of what you're looking for, you can be able to search online for those types of patterns. Or if you stay up to date with what pattern makers are doing, you can do that pretty well.
I see.
Vintage patterns are a fantastic resource. This is what all the big design houses do. They use vintage design as their foundation, even for current projects that they're doing, but they modify and modernize those patterns. And, fabrics can really modernize something as well. So that's how I kind of got into collecting patterns so that I can learn how to make things from scratch, but also modify and see the structure at, how all these beautiful garments were made in the 1920s through 1980s.
And when you collect patterns, it's actually the printout of the patterns on paper that you can buy and you collect them?
Yeah.
This is such a great collection to build.
Yeah, it's really fun. I mean, obviously, some of them, I would say your standard pattern that you buy from a sewing shop is around $10 to $20. And some of the collector's patterns can be in the couple of hundreds, if not close to $1,000 when you're buying these patterns, because they're very scarce. They might be from designers that are no longer around. So people try to clamor to collect these. And
for sure.
I know I'm giving away a secret, but I will let you know. Etsy is the best place that I found. Etsy has been my primary place.
Yeah, for sure.
eBay's been where I found some of the older collections. Oh.
Sorry.
It's okay.
So Etsy, sorry about that.
It's totally fine. So Etsy is the prime, I'm giving away a secret here. Etsy is the primary place where I have found a lot of my vintage patterns. There's a few smaller websites. I think So Vintage is one of them.
Yes.
And
I've been on it.
I'm trying to think of a couple other, but eBay as well, if you really know what you're looking for. But I've dug through the history and tried to understand patterns. And so just over time, I've collected these, and then these have kind of put forward my project on YouTube of documenting the creation process behind, either creating designs from scratch, which means making my own patterns.
So drawing, which you love to do.
Yeah, drawing and draping. I'm more of a draping gal. I have a mannequin at home that's fantastic. So it's draping for me is fun because there's that creative process of laying the fabric.
And you should watch Ashley doing it. As friends, obviously following her on her Instagram and all the social media. She does an amazing job. And we're going to give you some examples today of how she's draping the mannequins and creating the form, the shapes, and the angles and the geometry of the body.
Yeah, and it's quite interesting. I mean, I'll just talk about a project that's coming up. I worked with this fabric. I wish I brought it today because now it's like so hard to describe, but it's when you see it, it's such an interesting fabric. So it is they call it mercurial silk. And it's basically a silk that's woven with like almost fishing line. So one side feels and looks like silk, and the other side almost looks like the fabric's coated in liquid.
Wow.
And it's really interesting because at one point of the fabric, it doesn't fold or bend. It kind of balloons, so it just fights you, which is fantastic for volume garments. But then you have another side where it pleats really easily. So I had to manipulate the direction of each of those fabrics in order to create this really voluminous and interesting skirt. It is in one of my recent videos, so I'll be able to kind of walk you a little more in depth through it.
Absolutely, you want to watch. And it's like winemaking in many ways.
Yes.
Or cooking in some sense.
Yeah,
You really work with materials and fabrics and different impression. So when you start on a pattern, do you have an idea of what shape you want, or you just freely draw and you suddenly your hand guides you to a finish idea?
Yeah, so I sort of have an idea when I go into something how I want to feel or how I want to look, or the weather that I'm going into. That plays a lot into it. So I love classic hourglass shape. That's like my favorite. I love that the old Dior, like nice, the bar jacket with the big skirt. Oh, I absolutely love it. So I kind of have an idea in mind when I go in to make something, and I do sketch. I'm not like the world's greatest sketcher, but I can like do a good enough job to
that's great.
Be able to see what I need. And then based on that, I can go and hunt down whatever patterns I need and then make those manipulations that I need to make that custom look that I'm going for. So it's a very long process, but if you have an understanding, you know what foundations to work with based on the fabrics you're using.
And don't you think the future of fashion in many ways, thanks to the new digital era we live in and the technology we have, we will be designing the clothes we're going to wear that night and maybe dispose tomorrow.
Oh yeah, I mean, when you think of like 3D printing, that's, 3D printing is like here to stay. And I'm curious to see, there are startups that do have, I know one that was a denim company, and I'm like going to forget the name, but they were looking at building, and they showed us this crazy 3D weaver. So they could make custom jeans that fit you like in perfect to a T, your waist, your hips, everything. And so that the future is here for sure. And then there's also still the need for garments that are kind of a little too complex to make with 3D printing, and that might be a blazer or a jacket.
Or beautiful.
Or something that has a very intricate fabric. That's probably a ways out of the way in terms of being able to generate. But knitwear is really simple. So I think in the next couple of years, we'll start to see more and more 3D printed garments that are like more activewear, t-shirts, simpler garments.
And I'm excited as well in the world of fashion, and we're going to talk fabrics and garments to see such an evolution into recycling fabrics. Or even, which is what you do. And I want to salute you with JCB 81 because it's one of our favorite wines, is using vintage fabrics to create phenomenal clothes. So would you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we brought some of the kind of vintage patterns that I collect, and I'll kind of walk through just even a project that I am going to start working on.
So you collect patterns.
So I collect patterns. So this one is...
So show us, what is it?
Yeah.
What is a pattern?
So a pattern is, for all my home sewists out there, hello, hi, I see you. So for the person who has never sewn ever in their life, this is a sewing pattern. This is a vintage sewing pattern from 1956. This one's in very, very good shape. On the back, it usually has an idea of what the fabric, how much fabric you'll need, the type of fabric you'll want, the notions. Notions are things like zippers. So kind of like all the little extra hoodads, if you want to call it that. This has like a sketch so you can see, okay, this dress has a sleeve option, a sleeveless option, a longer skirt, a shorter skirt. But this is just giving you a general idea of what you're getting into.
So cool.
So it's kind of like okay, before you buy this pattern, just know you need 6 yards of this and 6 yards of that.
And Vogue used to sell the patterns for the lady who would want to do it at home.
Yeah. I would say, and this is just me being probably a snarky pattern person, like Vogue patterns back in the day, there were a lot more intricate, formal garments that I think to me are a little more interesting. It doesn't mean that the stuff that they do now is not interesting. Like they have lots of stuff that's kind of patterned after like current Alexander McQueen designs.
Sure.
So I think Vogue is hands down the best pattern like brand that you can buy. The vintage stuff is just, I feel like you just won't find this in today's world. So when you buy the pattern, it comes out with these, so the newer patterns, I mean,
look at this.
I don't want to get into like the little nitty gritty, but yeah, so basically back in the day, I love that they do this. They used to actually cut it out for you.
Wow.
Now you have to cut it out yourself, which is like so irritating. And then they put all the like holes for all the little notches and marks you need to make. So I need to know that I line up the shoulder here.
That's right.
And
so it's so well explained.
Yeah, so it's very well explained, and they have an instruction book in here for like how to like put the garment together. So typically when I make an outfit, what I do is I take this pattern and I trace it so that I could save the original without cutting it up.
Sure.
If I was going to alter, I would cut this up, but instead I trace it, and then I cut up
This is an amazing collection, what you're building.
Oh, yeah. I mean, these are...
As well. I collect decanters and you collect patterns.
Yeah.
You know? I love it.
Yeah. I mean, I everyone collects something that interests them, you know? And so with this pattern, what I'll do is I'll trace it on pattern paper.
Yes.
I'll cut out that pattern paper, and then I use a fabric called muslin. Mm-hmm. And muslin is basically a really inexpensive, cheap cotton fabric. It's a woven fabric. So woven means that, it's up over, whereas a knit stretches. So there's like a special little loop process. So a woven, this would be considered like a woven fabric.
I love that fabric, by the way.
Yeah.
So you go to the fabric store.
Yeah, so I either go to Britex in San Francisco.
Yeah,
That's like my
one
go-to
of my
shop.
favorite too.
Yeah, it's so fun. I love going in there. It's amazing. I do go to Britex quite often. On occasion, I do buy stuff online because now I'm more experienced enough to know what I'm getting into.
Sure.
I don't recommend it for like any beginners. You're going to make like probably some pricing mistakes because a lot of times people will just order the entire yardage they need and then they get it and it's too thick or it's too like stiff. And so these are actually swatches. I mean, these are the biggest swatches I've ever gotten, but
this is magnificent.
Yeah, so these are, kind of like your Chanel tweeds. Mm-hmm. And so with this process, I actually I make the entire garment in muslin first. And they do this with all the couture houses where they like make the garment first to test the fit, make modifications before you go into the fashion fabric, because fashion fabrics can be hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars a yard.
That's right.
So you don't want to make those mistakes.
So you do it, you sewing machine?
Yeah, so I sew it together and I check the fit. And once I get the fit done, then I have to take the pattern back to the pattern pieces and redo the pattern again. So, this...
God, I need a glass of wine after all that.
And this probably has around 15 pattern pieces. And it's very time consuming. It's, a slow process. Now, with technology, they have stuff where you can do stuff on the computer to make patterns, but it's all for very, very simple garments. Nothing that I've seen has been for a complex garment like this. So with this project, what's interesting is I'm using a fabric that's not used in the original pattern. So I have the challenge of figuring out how to make this fabric work for that pattern, which is going to be insanely difficult. It's probably going to take me 2 to 3 months to make this just because the patterning process, the figuring out how it fits, how do I get the collar to lay perfectly on my shoulder. I mean, it's a whole process. And then this, trying to figure out how to reinforce this fabric so it doesn't stretch or get weird. Yeah.
So that's why, dear friends, when you see a beautiful garment, you gotta congratulate the person
Yeah.
who wears it because you never know
Yeah.
the amount of work that has gone behind it.
Yeah, I mean, and it's just like with wine or fine dining, the process when you see, a chef explain
Yes.
how they made something, you're like, I'm so tired right now. Like that's so much work, but you taste it and it's just like magical and lovely. And so I have a big appreciation for people who spend a lot of time and effort to making something, nearly perfect.
So how would you match, for you as a wine expert, the wine style to a fabric? Why don't you describe it as a fashion designer?
This is a fashion designer.
So this is our Chardonnay from the Sonoma Coast JCB, which is typically very alluring and insatiable. Has to be because Ashley is insatiable, so we have to find the perfect match of the wine to the personality. But we're going to hear how she describes it. And as you all see, look at how cool. We're looking at phenomenal patterns, even some from the late 1800s. So this is so cool. Wow.
Yeah, that one's from the 1910s.
You have quite a collection. Huh?
Yeah, I love when I find these older patterns. I don't ever plan to cut these out. I just, they're
Do you frame them, or do you have a framing system to?
I am in the process because I've been also collecting historical, like vintage magazines. So I have like a collection of some Vogue and then Delineator.
Yeah.
So I'm like slowly building that up. But yeah,
but it's great
I plan
to do
frame
frames them. And
yeah, I have to do the frame with the glass that like UV protects it. Yeah, I have to do
and maybe screens as well. And
yeah.
so you separate a room, but it's a full series of. I'm
yeah.
doing that with the Playboy cover I was offered for my birthday.
Oh.
So I have the whole series of 1969, of course.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh,
so
that's cool.
I'm doing a separation of a room.
Yeah.
As a screen on wheels, so you could wheel it in and out, and it's all the historical covers of Playboy 1969 as an example.
That's really interesting.
In the middle, a Hugh Hefner letter to me because they were serving JCB 69 in the mansion.
Oh, that's really, I didn't know that.
Yes.
You're like, yes.
So how would you describe the wines? You want to escape that as a wine?
Yeah, if I had to describe this, I would almost describe it as like a crisp cotton dress. That's like the best way that, like, if I was drinking this wine, what is it that I'd want to wear? What is it like reminiscent of? And I think of like grassy fields of like someone running through with like their cotton gown and it's flowing through the wind. Woo! And, like freedom. And yeah, I'm like a huge fan of like Chardonnays and Sauvignon Blanc. So, when I think of this wine, I specifically think of, someone just like going out there and expressing themselves in just this nice billowy, light cotton dress. That's the best way.
Do you drink wine as you beautifully described, right? When you create?
Sometimes. I have to be careful because I use a rotary cutter and that thing will cut off your finger if you're not careful.
So too much wine is dangerous.
Yeah. I think more during the sketching and the initial design process, I'll drink wine. But when I'm in think of it this way, if it's too late at night, you're bound to make mistakes. So this is just a very tedious process where you have to be as like sharp as a whistle to like not
But
make
it's
mistakes.
fun to design your clothes. And don't you think it's maybe where we're going to be heading in the future?
Yeah, I would absolutely, I think like my goal, if like a couple years from now, if I look down the road and I say, where do I want to be? And I think I want to like democratize better patterns for, the home sewist or even just individual like tailors who want something to venture out outside of what they're currently sewing. I mean, obviously they're great at making suits. They do that all day, but I know that people kind of want to venture out creatively at times. And so it would be nice to democratize like really high quality patterns and stuff that's a little more intricate and advanced to make, but stuff that like motivates people to create things for themselves. And I want people to like express and to create instead of consume. And I,
I like
we're
that
coming down the environmental route now, and at heart, like I try to do my best to like make the most eco-friendly choices that I can. And although there is an eco footprint when you make clothes, like it's not like this fabric was made and then, no carbon emissions, but it is much more planet friendly to slow down and create your own clothes and clothes that are going to last a long time. And we have, this problem, now I'm going down this whole route where, this problem in, America or just the Western countries where we're just consuming so fast and we're buying so much. And so at times it's kind of like, I get it. People want to be trendy. They want to do what's in. But I feel like when you're chasing trends, you're kind of chasing something within yourself that's, not true to yourself. So, I want people to find their style, find what makes them confident, and then also to create something that they feel like beautiful in. And I think that patterns, that's my way of doing it without being a designer and creating more clothes that I hope they never end up in a landfill, but
That's an exceptional goal. I love it. And I'm so admirative and excited that that's your objective, because I think it fits exactly on how we ought to evolve. That intense consumerism is excessive, and I believe in any event, as you show through the patterns, that fashion reinvents itself.
Yeah, and I think with you mentioned the sustainable materials. Like people are making leather made out of mushroom that can decompose, and things that the life cycle, because even when you buy garments that say that they reuse this material or this is some organic or whatever, the thing is every fabric goes through a dyeing process, a finishing process, and that almost it cancels out all the good benefits of the fabrics, which is kind of like sad because you feel good and then you realize, oh wait, okay, that's like not true. And so, when I see stuff, I think Milo leather is the mycelium, the mushroom leather. And I'm really excited. I think they're doing something with like Mercedes-Benz, and they're like putting the leather inside their what's the car? The car, it's not out, but it's a concept car. And so it's interesting to see that materials, everyone's kind of trying to do it.
Yes.
So I'm very excited and happy to see that, because that makes, me feel better about it as a consumer, because I wonder, even my athletic wear, like I like buy stuff, so I buy athletic wear. And so when I'm done with it, I always go, oh, I feel so bad, because it's kind of like it's hit the end of its life, it's got a tear or something. And then it ends up in a landfill. It's like I could fix it, but then it tears again. And it's just kind of, you start to feel bad. So I hope at some point we find either we create garments that are meant to live forever, or we make garments that recycle and don't pollute the planet.
That's right.
Yeah.
I think it's a great one or the other.
Yeah.
Now, you use as well historical fabrics, so scarves or vintage elements to create your own.
Yeah. So you can buy vintage fabrics. They're really hard to come across. They don't come in a lot of quantity, and you also have to be very careful when you handle them. I stopped working with vintage fabrics because I found it really hard to, basically what happens is, let's just say in this, I accidentally cut something out wrong and I don't order enough yardage. I can 50% of the time reorder new fabric.
Yes.
With vintage fabric. So you ruin it. So it's just it usually happens when you're sleepy. If you're cutting late at night and you're not paying attention and you've cut, on the wrong grain line, so instead of cutting straight down, I accidentally cut sideways. And then that's it.
So how do you cut with such beautiful fingernails?
Oh yeah. Well, I stopped playing piano, so then I was like, well, I'm gonna get some long nails. But
are you a pianist as well?
No, I my husband plays piano, and so I was like, well, I'll take piano lessons. And I'm really, I played clarinet growing up, so the piano is just very much more complex with two hands. And I was doing Zoom lessons, and hi, Christina, you're the best. She was fantastic. It just was very time consuming to do this with YouTube full time. So I just had to stop doing it. And then after that, I was like, I can get long nails again and it's fine. I only have trouble picking off pins that fall on the ground. That's my...
Well, maybe they never fall.
Yeah. Well, I really try. I'm really making sure they don't fall.
So in terms of where do you see the evolution of your craft in fashion? So you mentioned You're creating a lot of patterns right now. You mentioned the direction you want to go, but what are the next steps?
Yeah, so the next steps, I really want to build out my YouTube channel. I think I want to inspire people. So
Yes.
my first goal is to inspire people to create. So you might be a beginning sewist. You might not know what you're getting into, but I hope that by watching my process, people don't feel as I guess like insecure about their abilities.
Yes.
Because I think that there are going to be, trust me, there are going to be painful moments where you're like, I have sewn this wrong. Oh my God, my project's like totally ruined. It happens to everyone. But you have to just be prepared for those moments, take it in, learn from the mistake, and then move forward. So, I really want to just inspire as many people as I can. So right now I'm just trying to kind of show people that you don't need to make garments in less than an hour to be happy. Like actually taking the time and effort to craft these like really beautiful, luxurious garments is well worth the effort and the time. And so right now, purely inspirational. Maybe eventually down the road, I'll take, one-off garments for people who are like, need something for like an event.
Which is what you're doing for a
So
friend of
I am
yours.
doing that for a friend.
I'm going to get another glass of wine for you because it's essential as we're talking garments, patterns, or anything else that we have an animalistic wine.
Yeah.
Because I know how you like to be on the dance floor as well. And we all feline here. The menagerie is on. So this is a leopard, as you know. This is one of my favorite wine in your honor here today.
Thank you.
So you making for a friend of yours.
So I had a friend ask me if I would make her wedding dress, and I accepted. So I am super excited to be making a wedding dress for her. I have a mannequin in her size, so it was like easy for me to be like, oh, of course I can take this on. In a recent project, I had done corsetry, and so I kind of fine-tuned my skills during that project. So, she was looking at dresses that might have some corsetry in it. So I was like, oh, this is easy. This is totally fine. So, I'm still in the process of working with her to make the gown, but I'm super excited. I mean, she's shown me some like very cool inspiration and obviously is going to give me, creative freedom. But I'm also considering, I think with every bride or just every person out there in general, when you're wearing garments, you want to feel confident. So everyone has a random insecurity. People will tell you the most random stuff and you're like, oh, really? You're insecure about that part of your body? I would have never guessed. But you always want to make sure that the garment addresses that and accentuates someone's form to the best of that ability.
How do you win over your most uncomfortable, possible wishes of wearing certain clothes? How did you succeed to go beyond, that daunting moment? Can I really wear this? Or shall I really wear this?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, so I think a lot of times when you're thinking about the garment and from a stylistic perspective, it's kind of like you want to think about the environment you're going to be in. So are you with people your age who are, they dress a certain way? Do you want to stay more conservative, cover up? Do you want to kind of let it all hang out? Kind of some people have some people don't care. So if you're the person who doesn't care, wear whatever you want. If you're the kind of person that's I don't want to be the only person with a plunging neckline down to my belly button, you probably shouldn't make or wear a garment that way. And then also, again, addressing what makes you feel confident. If you're a woman or a guy, if you want to wear a mini skirt, if it makes you feel confident, go ahead. But if you're the kind of person who's I just feel uncomfortable when I sit down, maybe wear something down to your knees or, you could go down to your calves. It just kind of depends. And then you have to think of the overall silhouette. So a lot of times
the key, the silhouette.
Yeah, so a lot of times people make the mistake where they will... Okay, this is just me pushing my rules on the world. But, as a general rule, as this for women's clothing, as the skirt gets shorter, the sleeves should get longer. You shouldn't be in a tube top and a mini skirt. It just is unless the garment has some very exceptional quality, it's a highly beaded garment with an incredible shape. I think of like a YSL dress at the moment that's coming off the top of my head where I'm like, no, that works. But in the general sense, you should balance the garment.
And proportion should be somehow, and symmetry maybe.
Yes,
in
100%.
some shape or form.
Yeah, so you just, I mean, if you want to cheat, the best way to go is just look at the runway and just see like, how's the runway proportioning their garments. Obviously, there's some designers where I'm like, they make everything like a mini skirt, like it's so short. I've tried on their garments and I'm like, wow. But
well, we don't mind seeing you in mini skirts.
Oh yeah.
You wear it very well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind a mini skirt, but yeah. So okay, hold on. Some mini skirts can be so short though. You're like, you know, it's like when you think back to like the early 2000s and all the celebrities would get out of the car and they all had all the like pictures of them getting out of the car. That's like what too short miniskirt reminds me of.
Yeah, for sure. So, you know, you work on your silhouette, you define what you want to portray as an image, who you want to be that day.
Yeah.
And so, what's your style?
I'm a little, like, I love tailoring. So I love to wear stuff with like a collar. I do love sleeves. I feel like sleeves make me feel confident. So I just I love sleeves. I'm a sleeve freak. But I also love volume on garments. I just must have a waistline. Mm-hmm. That's like the one thing. Some people can totally pull off something with like a wider waistline. I'm like, no, you bring that in and make it as tight as possible. I need the hourglass.
You like
shape.
it to be.
Oh, I love the hour. I must have hourglass. So yeah, I think I'm a little more classic. So stuff like this really brings me in, but I want to modernize it with like these more modern fabrics. Mm-hmm. So it's like, yeah, you can make this look like a 1950s garment if you go down the same design direction, but you can also really modernize this look. Like I can change like a bit of the collar to be rounded and just do like minor modifications that aren't super difficult, but make something elevated and new. And that's what all the design houses do. So
what's your dream?
I mean, my dream, honestly, would be to have the pattern company and to really create, you know, not maybe every season I have 5 looks and they're just really well immaculate patterns for people to create high elevated looks. So you can take that pattern to your personal tailor and say, can you make this for me? You know, I want to bring more to the local economy instead of seeing fashion, which is broadly made overseas, you know, driving all the money overseas. So I'd like to see people spend more locally. So that would be like my dream, is to have that pattern company and inspire people to create at home or work with other creatives around them to build their, you know, dream outfit.
That's an amazing goal. Ashley, this is so exciting.
Yeah, I'm very excited.
So much going on. And you live between Napa and San Francisco.
Yeah, so in Napa full time, that's where my studio is. I have like a gorgeous table that I work on, and you know, I love Napa. It's so peaceful. It's so green. It's so beautiful. I get to see you.
Thank you. And we get to drink wine.
Yes, exactly. And all the best food and wine is here. So, you know.
And finally, how do you get inspired? What really is your source of inspiration? Is there a specific path you go to, from books to movies to TVs to shows to other designers to nature? I know it's a wide question, but as a creator, I need certain things to be inspired.
I think fashion it's a blend of like literally everything you just said. You know, I can reference old movies. Like I had someone ask me, they wanted to commission a jacket made from like an old vintage film. I had to like decline, but I was like, oh, that's cool. Like if you watch these vintage movies, there's, you know, and there are patterns that are literally garments made from those vintage movies. You can find them. So, you know, I think I get a lot of inspiration from what current designers are doing, because I'm kind of like, what are they doing? But a lot of times I'm like, I don't like any of this, because there's specific aspects where I'm like, that color could be better for me. That silhouette could be better for me if this was done. So there's lots of things. But I think, you know, I get highly inspired by fabric, which is like probably the most backwards way to do it, because most people will sketch and they'll say, this is how the fabric looks. I pick up a fabric and I go, you know what, I'm actually going to do something with this, and I'm going to blend this so it has this like Chanel-esque look. I'm going to use this vintage pattern to like really amplify and make that couture like outfit. And maybe I'll buy like a Chanel accessory to like really like boost it up because they do a really good job at like really elevating these types of fabrics. So it's just, I get inspired by a lot of things. And I think, you know, fabrics are one. I get inspired by nature. I get inspired by film. I get inspired by designers. It just kind of when I'm walking through life, I'm just constantly looking for inspiration.
I love it. You know what? I just got inspired. I'm going to give up my scarf. And maybe I can get Ashley to make me a beautiful scarf one day.
Oh,
Look
yes.
at that.
Yeah. Oh,
Wouldn't
it's
it be
so
great?
fancy. Yeah.
See, I placed my order.
Yeah.
So, dear friends, wasn't it fun and exciting and show you that when you have passion and you have discipline and you have talent naturally, which you inherently have, to be able to define a space. I mean, pattern making is brilliant. And I love as well, Ashley, so much your willingness to really take into account the environment and the local economy, the community, making things yourself without displacing necessarily fashion to be made in other places around the world, and bring it to the family household and the seamstress at home.
Yes.
I mean, I've seen that all my life. My grandmothers, great-grandmothers were making their clothes.
Wow.
And it was very durable and phenomenal and so precise.
Yeah.
And they could fix it.
Yeah, they could fix anything. Like anyone who had an at-home seamstress, you know, you were never the kid that had something like ripped because they were always fixing it for you. You know, it's.
And you know what I've loved is, as a final note, my grandmother's redesigning her mother's dress, and her mother redesigning the beautiful dress she had inherited because she never wanted to lose that beautiful fabric that was within the family.
Wow.
So I think
That's
there's
really
so
cool.
much to be done with this, whether it's with fur, with silk. We've seen it a lot with Hermes scarf.
Yeah.
Really recreating beautiful dresses. So isn't it fun to spend time with Ashley? So watch her on her YouTube channel.
Yes.
And Facebook and Instagram and
Yes.
all over.
All over, yes. You can catch me at the Sewiste. It's Sewist with an E at the end on YouTube, as well as Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook.
Well, congratulations to
Thank you
your
so much.
entrepreneurship, charm, and talent. You can all do it.